Hello and welcome to the Drum History Podcast. I'm your host, Bart Vanderzee, and today I'm joined by Mr. Mario DeCiutiis, who is the president of Alternate Mode, Inc. Mario, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for inviting me here.
Yes, it's an honor. We've been talking for a while, and we have some mutual friends, and you're someone who comes very highly recommended as a really just a veteran of the industry who's done quite a bit, which I'm excited to hear about. Really, when I think of you, I think of the cat percussion and the malletKAT and just the incredible innovation that you've created with that. But on top of that, you've also been a percussionist with Radio City Music Hall for a long time, up until a couple years ago, since I believe 1979. Is that right?
Till 2020.
Till 2020, which a lot of things stopped in 2020.
I think so.
As we know. So, all right, Mario. So this is an interesting one because you've got so much cool stuff that you've done. I'd like to just hear about your background. So why don't we jump in with really the beginning of your drumming and journey, and then we'll get into the business and all the percussion stuff and all that. So tell us about you.
Okay. I was started off as a drummer, but wanted to be a violin player. And I guess when I went to college, I went to Bronx Community and then Queens College. Got a partial scholarship at NYU, and I started studying with Dave Friedman. I discovered in college that my thing wasn't orchestral percussion. I wanted to play jazz or play more mallets. It was more fun playing shows percussion than playing a triangle in an orchestra. This wasn't my thing. So I went to college studying jazz, and I started playing in some funk bands. And my fingers used to bleed because everything was rocking away and my vibraphone just... So I had this incredible desire to get involved in electronics. There was an article in Modern Drummer in the mid-'80s, early 80s, about a guy in Longmeadow, where I live now, Bill Katowski, that was making or about to make a mallet instrument. So I immediately called him up and I drove up there, and he showed me this gigantic thing that was millions of wires on it. And it had some, I believe, additive synthesis kind of thing with simple oscillators. But the DX7 had just come out. And that just like rocked my world. It rocked the whole music world. It was the first time we were hearing FM synthesis, beautiful sounds. So I was influential in telling Bill to abandon this thing and to make a MIDI controller, because Yamaha had, was so far ahead in the sound department with that FM synthesis stuff. So he did. And we became friends, and I was taking control voltage in college. So I was learning music. I was learning the Buchla system, the Moog system, so I was having music concrete. I was having fun in all those things, actually taking master courses while I was still in my bachelor's. So Bill and I became really good friends. And it wasn't too long when he decided to go into business that I became his partner. So we were partners from 85 up until 95 when KAT went out of business. And in 96, I took it over. But one of the interesting things that happened, 86, 87, I was playing on this thing called the World Yacht. It was a little dinner boat that went around Manhattan. And it had the earliest mallet instrument. And I drove the saxophone player home. And he said to me, "I feel sorry for you, man." "Why do you feel sorry for me?" "Your instrument sucks."
That's not nice.
"Why does it suck?" "All the notes are the same length. You can't bend notes. You can't add vibrato. You don't have control of how you can give staccato vibrato." And I said, "Oh my God." It was like he changed my life, that guy. From then on, it was about building a vocabulary in the instrument. And it's been the thing that has been driving me since that day. Luckily, the thing about Bill was an engineer, not a musician. So I would just fill up his mind constantly. This is how we should do this. This is how we do that. And I would get like a chip the next day. Try this out. consider myself the luckiest guy in the world to be able to dream of features and have it given it to you. So I was in love with those early KAT days.
That's unbelievable. I mean, but you clearly have a brain for this kind of thing, like I guess it'd be electrical engineering. I mean, what was your degree in school? Was it this type of stuff? Or?
No, I was a music major. I had no concept, thought, imagine, and no idea that I was going to get involved in any of this. I just basically fell in love with getting involved with Bill, having an instrument finally that I could, play, could be heard. And then when I started thinking about how can we make it more expressive? What are the things how is emotion described when you play? When you think about it, well, it's because you bend the note a little bit, you add a little vibrato, you add a little filter for all these little things can be quantified. So it's been all that. And the jamKAT, the hand drum that I created, had the most expressive stuff ever, but it was beyond what a hand drummer was. It became really more a melodic compositional tool. Sure. But for me, it was the ultimate expression, and it was the first hardware product that didn't come from the KAT days. It came from some of the KAT engineers, but my concept, which was from learning from Bill, when you work with an engineer for 10 years, you get very skillful in being able to communicate to engineers, and that's what another gift that Bill gave me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different language. I mean, it is a 100% different world, but it sounds like it's interesting to me that he's not Bill wasn't a musician, but he still saw the opportunity to create vibes that were electronic with his first design instead of the MIDI. So that would be everything in one. The brain was inside of it. It had built-in sounds, right? That was his first. But then you said, no, MIDI's the way to go. We got to control the things.
Well, he worked with Star Instruments back then, way back. Do you remember Star Instruments?
No, I think I've heard of it, and I did an E-drum episode, and that is coming back. The name. Yeah,
this little drum, but it had a step sequencer in there. It was kind of like an analog digital hybrid. I mean, that was Bill. And then he left and he started working for Hasbro. Okay. Hasbro was going to be making, Milton Bradley was going to be making some kind of a digital xylophone. Sure. They abandoned the idea, and Bill said, you know what, I really want to do this. And they got permission to take the project, and he left them and created the KAT.
Got it. Now, when did you guys go to market? When did you, besides you just playing it, but what was the creating the business, actually making this thing a boxed up, ready to sell product?
Well, interesting thing happened. At Radio City, there was a strike. The orchestra had a strike, again, in the late 80s or something. And the orchestra got arrested in front of Radio City in our tuxedos. It was just like this publicity stunt. It meant nothing. It was just a stunt. But when I was sitting there in my tux, handcuffed to the violin player who was then 75 and I'm 28, what am I doing? So I really got mad at music, and I said, I'm ready to do something else. I just had this urge and when I started working with Bill, so we decided that, let me start selling to you. I'll sell in my basement. I know the guys at Manny's. And we did that kind of thing. And slowly but surely, I got hooked into the selling thing. And I started reading all these books on how to sell and books on, how to create a rep force. And so I became the sales force for KAT Inc. Sure. Back in those late 80s up until 95, 96.
Yeah, I mean, you have that well, first off, you're knowledgeable, but you have that from talking to you on the phone for a while. But I feel like everyone who comes in contact with you kind of becomes your friend. You're very personable, where I could see that very much being you would be a good salesman for it. Plus, it sounds like you had the best of all the worlds, where it's the instrument. You're playing at Radio City Music Hall, which cannot be. I mean, that's one of the biggest shows in the world. That's kind of the top of the top. So clearly you're an incredible performer, but I can totally see you being a great salesman for this,
I love the product. It was it became synonymous with it. I mean, when CAT went out of business in 95, I can tell you why that happened. But when that happened, I couldn't stop. No, this is my instrument. So I picked it up with a totally different mindset that I didn't care about reps, stores, distributors anymore. I just wanted to keep it small so I could get back into playing more. So at the time, it was like, you're doing what? You're going to sell direct. The stores will never talk to you again. The internet was just starting, but the internet saved me, and I was able to sell direct for, 20 years.
Got it.
And it was just only when more competition came in that I needed to get Big Brother involved.
Sure.
Back in the days in the 80s, it was really interesting time. There were so many small American innovative companies doing incredible things, ARP, and it was an exciting time because a small company could survive selling that way. But what happened was the Walmart mentality came in, and all of a sudden, containers are coming in from China. So you needed mass marketing, and because there was mass marketing, they had to sell to the masses. So the quality of the product started going down. Because every decision was based on, will you save 25 cents by doing this? Or we're going to get 1,000 of those. And we don't care about the features because we wanted to make it work for everybody. It was the absolute opposite of what I wanted.
Yeah.
I wanted to make the best instrument. I never even thought or cared about what it cost. I just wanted to make it and then to make it the best that I could so I could enjoy it the most. And hopefully there'd be enough people to allow me to continue my game of hiring engineers to let me have fun in my basement.
Yeah, and let them do the actual building and putting together of the circuits and all that stuff. You're the creative guy. And just to kind of clear it all up a little bit. So CAT, can you just give us a very simple, like the timeline of things, and we'll jump back and kind of go more through the history, but how did that all go? Just so people kind of know the names of where we're at, basically.
So it started as Katowski Engineering.
Okay.
That was his first mallet instrument, totally analog. When he started to, when Bill was convinced that going to a controller was the way to go, and we started working together, and he hired people to put a thing, CAT became the name.
Got it.
And we became CAT Inc., I think in 85, could have been 86, but I think we were officially CAT Inc. in 85. And our big instruments then, we did the malletKAT, we did the DITI, which is the trigger to MIDI interface. We did the drumKAT, and then the trapKAT. And the trapKAT is what killed the company.
Really?
Yeah, what happened was we started to say, well, we need to get to a new level here. We need to make it turnkey, blah, 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 blah. So we got together with the folks at Kurzweil, the Waltham, not far from here, was the whole engineering team. And we went to them and say, we want a sampler synth inside this instrument. And their director was all for it, and we were going to put stuff in that was like, it came out 20 years later. But so with that in mind, CAT got large amounts of loans because the trapKAT was going to sell. We were going to be rich with this thing, with the sounds built in, the best sounding engine, 24 pads FSR. Well, in the middle of the project, so we got the loan. So all the loans are spent, and when you get a loan in the bank, there are certain covenants that you have to adhere to. So the engineer at Kurzweil decides to leave. So when he left, it put Kurzweil in this horrible place, and they had to abandon our project. So now we have an instrument that doesn't have sounds in it. Then the company that builds the sensors didn't support the tails properly as it comes out of the circuit board, and they started to snap. And we didn't know it until after we had hundreds out into the field. So they were coming back. So the product coming back, going down, stores all annoyed at us, no sounds built in, unable to get the turns, and the banks are seeing that they're coming back, they turned in their loan. So 10 years of work, this disappeared in 60 days.
Jeez.
It's a lesson for young entrepreneurs. Don't be so anxious to get that loan, because if anything turns hairy, you are fried.
Wow. Yeah.
So they had their whole life, their house, everything in jeopardy. At the same time, I couldn't live without it. My wife was a successful realtor. She was a manager in the second largest real estate thing in Long Island. I convinced her to leave her job to move up here. And a few months later, we were out of business.
Oh, boy.
So I had to pick it up.
Yeah.
But the goal was that it would be here for a few years. That Bill would help me. Bill helped me with the transmit. He got himself another job right away. But no one wanted this to die yet. So I found myself, all right, after a year's time, I started, the EMU folks contacted me.
Yep.
And they helped me get back into production. So they also helped me get it into stores. They would get a TrapKAT in the store, but not sell them stands for the TrapKAT. And the whole quarter would go by, and Guitar Center or somebody would say, this thing isn't selling. And I'd call up EMU and say, where are the stands? Don't tell us how to sell. So after a year and a half of that, I got everything back. So EMU was no longer the distributor, and now I was by myself. And that's what I said. I'm done with stores. I'm done with reps. I'm done with everybody. Let's keep it small. Let's really become small so I can enjoy my life and still keep the thing going.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been doing. So in 1996, my wife and I started alternate mode.
Smart. Yeah.
And we and like I said, we managed to keep it going until the market changed, and I suddenly realized I needed help.
Yeah. And then you connected with Hal Leonard, correct, who is licensing the KAT brand, because that is it's famous. I mean, your innovative technology has really it's known. And I feel very again, I've said it before, but in that world with orchestral percussion and vibes and things like that, that is outside of my world. But even I know about the malletKAT. I mean, it seems like an industry standard. Do you have a lot of competition? I mean, I don't know much about this world at all.
Well, there was almost none at all. And then there was a guy in UK, Xylosynth, different instrument completely. And we both coexisted easily. We were both expensive, making them in small, in our little factories. But then Pearl came out with a mallet station. And they did the thing that I talked about with, the Walmart mentality. They got 1,000 of them made. They got them made overseas. And they brought the thing in and selling it cheaper than I could get the metal for. You know what I mean? It was like one of those kinds of things. So it was an existential threat. So I used that as an opportunity to go to Hal Leonard and said, they will bring the marketing to show the world that there's a electronic mallet instrument out there.
Yeah. And
we can piggyback because my instrument's better. The good news is that they didn't do it right. If they didn't done it right, I wouldn't be here. At least in business.
Yeah, but no, the positive outlook you're having on it, which I think is smart, is sometimes competition. I mean, it's a pretty niche market, and for someone like a big brand like Pearl to bring the attention to it, and then people are maybe searching it online, and then they realize there is your brand. That is a good way to look at it, where then people maybe find you. When
it first came out, sales stopped. Whoa, where's the floor? And then it just I'm right back where I was.
Interesting.
It's just a different headspace.
Yeah.
And I got aggressive too. I have to admit, I made videos showing what mine could do, which I knew theirs couldn't. So I emphasized that kind of thing. At the same time, why it's exciting with the Hal Leonard thing is the appeal to make the next generation. If I pull this thing off, this next generation, It's going to revolutionize electronic percussion.
Really? Like now you are working?
Like now we are working on it.
Cool.
I was working on it independent of Hal Let It up until the COVID, and I could no longer afford the engineers. I was hardware and software engineer with making a whole new stuff. The technology has changed so much that you can get thousands of levels of dynamics when you're playing. It can tell you where you struck it on the bar. Another fortuitous thing that happened was I met a guy in Austria with a company called V3 Sound, and we're working together on sound libraries. So now I have a killer vibraphone mallet orchestral percussion library, a killer hand drum library with world percussion, Latin percussion, Asian percussion, cool. Turkish percussion. It's just like that. And now we're working on a drum thing as well.
Interesting. And there's still controllers where historically you would always have to have like a outboard, a MIDI, like a brain, like a box that has all the sounds in it. Still, well, I guess now people would probably hook it up to their computer.
Well, that's I say that's always been our problem, is that you have to get people to connect things. No, I want to make a turnkey box.
Yeah.
You turn the thing on, there's the sounds, listen to it. But it's going to have a connection, a USB connection to software, because I've been working on a whole new set of sequencing software. All the either if you look at a program, these amazing programs like Digital Performer, Ableton Live, they're wonderful, super powerful to finish your thing, but the looper program has always been limited. You got these floor loopers so I created this, or I'm working on this thing called a Catalyst that allows you to, on the fly, without touching your computer, you can create loops of different lengths, put them together. You can transpose them. You can quantize them in subtle ways. You have a metronome that's a rhythmic generator so that it improvises with you, like a little AI stuff going on to practice. And I think that's the future, especially when you combine it with a company like Hal Leonard that has publications.
Yes, yeah.
So I'm hoping that the next generation will be so simple. It'd be like a Casio keyboard. Casio can sound pretty good. Their keyboards are pretty high end now, but people don't consider that because they're so simple to use. That's the way to get into every school in the country, by making it simple to use.
I mean, for most people, as you're saying, that's the barrier. Is like, well, wait, it would almost be like a kid would buy it by mistake, thinking it had things in it. Let's say a keyboard that's like an Alesis MIDI keyboard, and then they return it because there's no sounds in there, which you wouldn't blame someone for that. But it's like having things built in is nice. There's just two almost levels. There's a level of something that comes loaded with things, and then there's the more professional one where you got to do the work to put them in, where a pro would want his own sounds or her own sounds,
the younger people that call themselves producers, that mentality, they're into the technology.
Yes.
They want the looping, they want the slicing and the rexing, and they want all that. But drummers, by and large, don't want that. Yes, some of them, they'll buy a computer, they'll get, addictive drums or tune tracks or,
sure.
Great libraries. But most drummers are very hesitant to take that on the field, to take that on the gig. Yep. They want it, just turn the thing on and play it already. So I think that's where I want to go from now on. At Radio City, we're using 4 or 5 malletKATs and drumKATs and jamKATs. I mean, this whole thing using 5 computers, backups on top of back. It's insane.
That's awesome. Well, how does a purist, vibe purist, like orchestral purist, how do they look at that? Again, I'm not in that world. When someone comes into Radio City and sees all the electronics, which I think it's 2022, it's awesome. It gives you more options to put all these things in there. How is it received from the, the purists out there?
Well, it's interesting. The young players that are coming in auditioning, Juilliard grads, Mann School grads, all great players. 90% of them have no prior experience with electronics. So they'll do their auditions on acoustic timpani and on a marimba or something. And then they come in and they're surrounded with this. So there is a disconnect. And I think the reason why there's a disconnect is because it's not properly taught in schools yet. So in order for this to be successful, really, the manufacturer needs to start looking as one of their primary goals is to educate the educators. And if we can, with this new stuff, and especially with this software where you can teach people how to improvise in new in different ways, if you can create a syllabus that way and present it to some young percussion instructors or jazz instructors, now every year that school will start pumping out a new generation of drummers and percussionists that see that it's a valid art form.
Sure.
See, one of the bad things about electronics, especially drums, because of this mentality that they have to sell to the masses, you make a $300 kit, a $500 kit, a $700. It's great, but it's shite. It's not musical enough to say this is my instrument. They'll practice in the basement. They'll do it, in the dorm. But how many times do you go to a concert and you see just an electronic drum? It's pejorative in nature. On a mallet instrument, on this thing, to me, it's better than acoustic vibraphone because I can bend notes. I can add vibrato. I can control the gate in ways that you can't do with just a piece of wood or a vibraphone. So for me, if I had to be stuck in one room for the rest of my life with a vibraphone or a malletKAT, there's no question. With this percussion library that we put originally for the jamKAT, if I put on every octave of this malletKAT, a conga, a bongo, a tumba, a quinto, and you start playing, you suddenly realize that you have 4 octaves of sounds. And by starting to learn patterns, you can create a groove of a whole section that you can't do on any other controller other than a keyboard.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So I'm learning now. It's like I'm learning how to play. I've never dealt with. I'm going to play this combination of a Doombeck with a shaker or a shaker, and I'm learning. Whoa! You can create the imagination that the shaker is continuing, or the triangle is continuing, or the bongos, because the way you do that boom, it's going to be there. So you can and So I'm hoping in the next few months I'm going to be pumping out tons and tons of videos of showing all these new sounds that I'm just learning how to play right now.
Well, I mean, that raises the question too of, you've been doing this a long time. Like, there might be other people who are in your generation who are maybe like a little bit hesitant to try and get into all this electronic stuff. Even younger people. I mean, like you said, you were coming up in music school and you just kind of got into this and you've relied on, electrical engineers and people like this. But what would you say is maybe advice of people, let's say people over the age of like 50 who have no real background in messing with, MIDI and controlling sounds, and either in the percussion world or in the drum world or whatever. But what is some tips you would give for how to shake that kind of fear of, I don't know, I'm not good with computers, I'm not good with electronics. Any advice?
Yes. I mean, that's the goal of the next generation. You don't need a computer. You don't need to know the language of MIDI. If you see a little button that says vibraphone, you click it.
Yeah.
Now you want marimba, you click it. It becomes that. And then I think what happens is you find your own voice. And then the instrument teaches you. In a way, if you allow yourself the space to let it tell you where you're at and what you are, and you stick with that, then now you're communicating with your instrument and you've found your voice. Sometimes you think you want to be this, but it's telling you you're this. If you stay there and let it's kind of like it's almost alive in a way. It's your mind, but so I find that it's giving me a voice.
Sure.
It's giving, and when I'm saying, I wish it could do this. Hey, Chuck, can you put this in there? I got to find a way of doing that.
Hey guys, I'm excited to announce I just became a partner with Drumeo, and I can now offer a free 30-day trial of Drumeo to my listeners and viewers, and I think you guys are going to really like it. Find the link in my description for a free 30-day trial of Drumeo. It sounds like too, like you can, like you're saying, like there's like, yeah, you can, it's pretty simplified, and it will be more simplified, but it seems like you could do the bass level and make it sound great, but then you could kind of dip your toe in a little more. Like you can kind of create, it's sort of like a blueprint where, you know, people can do whatever they want with it if they want to get more into sounds and tweaking things and using computers. It's a very powerful tool.
It's my hope that that we'll start finding ways to incorporate it with education, so that when people want to get beyond just the preset, the little preset of the sound, saying, boy, you know, that sound just lasts a little bit too long, I want it to be shorter, that they can find a way of getting into the gate time of the note, changing it, you know, those kinds of things. So in my mind, everything is drag and drop.
Sure.
And I want to eliminate as much of the MIDI words as possible. So if you see a picture of a Deegan vibraphone and you drop it on the thing, it sucked up those samples, it put the right octave in the right place, and, you know, all that I do. But if someone wants to change it, I'm going to give them the tool to go into their computer interface, see that on the screen, change, and then change that themselves.
Yeah. There's something about MIDI that, I mean, I've had a fair amount of experience with MIDI, with like, you know, working in Pro Tools and the MIDI stuff there, and, you know, like creating kind of background music for like videos or something, pretty basic stuff. But it's almost like it can be as crazy and involved as you want it to be. Like you can go nuts and you can program things to do anything you want with it. Like it's basically endless, but it's daunting at first. Not your instruments, but just MIDI in general is sort of there's a lot to it.
It's a language, yeah.
It's a language.
And another thing that I noticed that fear, you said, you know, older people, learning to manipulate loops in real time threatens drummers. It doesn't have to. For example, if you have a little file that does this, da-dum da-da, bop, chop, da-dum da-da, shaka-daka-dak-da-ba-dum, ba-ba, you suddenly realize I am just playing this and I'm getting da-da-da-ka-dum, da-ka-dum, ba-ba, and then you can start building stuff and the creative process becomes the exact way when you were playing this.
Yeah.
You don't have to always spend your whole life sitting down, playing bass, playing hi-hat. No, you can have a hi-hat just giving you that beat, and you can. So to me, exploring loops, not in the producer way where they just turn on the thing and they think they got a groove.
Sure.
Interacting with that groove in a way that you become part of that groove is an exciting new thing. And again, I'm learning because I came from the old school. You know, 70s, 80s, I was playing orchestral, you know, timpanis, xylophone, bells, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I haven't touched those instruments in years now.
Do you have fun hopping? I was going to say, do you have fun hopping on real acoustic instruments? Or, I mean, you're like, this is your business. This is your baby. But like, is it fun for you to hop on those every once in a while and kind of, you know, go back to the olden days of instruments?
I sold them all. No, I don't miss them. I have to be honest.
All right. Yeah. Well, you're, of course, this is your world, but yeah. I mean, I'm sure some people, you gotta always remember, I'm sure you've felt that throughout your career of I feel like electronic drums and percussion. I keep saying drums just because of the show and my background, but electronic instruments and acoustic instruments are always sort of like, it's one or the other. It's rarely both together. In general, what's your thoughts on those two different worlds coming together?
I think that the real hybrid has not happened yet. That it's been attempted several times by different companies in different ways, but it's not here yet, including us. Although we're working on something. Well, you know, we had I was in a project with Aquarian Drums. With Miditronics, the company, Frank Eventhoff was the inventor of FSR, and we got together, created Miditronics, and we went to Aquarian to put sensors inside the head. Have you ever seen that?
I don't think I've seen that.
It's a head, an acoustic head, and sandwiched inside that head is a layer of conductive ink ink that responds, and then there's dielectric dots that separate a circuit. And what happens is juice is flowing through that thing, and when you put your finger on it, it creates resistance. So by measuring resistance, you can determine how hard you hit or where you hit. And you can do hold and don't note and sustain. Ba, 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 ba.
Wow.
You can't do that with piezo technology. So FSR is a interesting tool to get expression out. So we made these heads that have zones inside them. What's cool about that is that you could be playing on the head, you're hearing the sound, you will not get that electronic sound until you actually strike that black ink. So you can have multiple, so it's the first time that you have a triggering technology that doesn't interact. There's no false triggering of any kind.
Yeah.
So in our first attempt when we were working, well, I should go back a little bit. You said from CAT, there was an adventure with KMC. And KMC was going to use the CAT name, and we started working together. We're talking about the future of making new stuff. And then KMC sold it to Fender. And Fender had all the stuff for a while. And then Fender sold it to DW. So my life just keeps on different hats, you know.
Same story, different person. I mean, it's relevant right now, you know.
And then after a while, I think DW had too much stuff from KMC. They were selling the Latin percussion and the Gibraltar. So they sold it to they transferred the license, the CAT license that I had given KMC, Fender, DW, over to Hal Leonard. So that's just a little progression of things. So, okay.
Yeah.
So then my hope was to make this hybrid drum set with Aquarian. We called them in heads and on heads. And then alternate mode called them hybrid heads, hybrid pads. Same product, we're just marketing it differently. But the same problem arose. We had to rely on plugging into a Roland module or a Yamaha module or a Lease module. So we weren't ready yet. We didn't have all the tools in place to make it a turnkey concept. That is the key to success today.
Yeah.
Especially because young people have attention problems. Instant gratification, man. It has to really, you can't expect someone to want to dig in and learn the technology unless they're already in love with the thing they're playing.
Yeah.
So I have to create the love first. So I'm hoping the next generation will have this kind of technology, not another mesh head. So that what I like, imagine a drum where as you play from center to edge, just like an acoustic drum, you're hearing the harmonic cycle change. Mm-hmm. So imagine if a recording was able to capture all that. So you start to get, all of a sudden that drum it'd be very blurred between what is acoustic and what is electronic right now.
Yeah. I mean, because you've seen the whole progression from, going back to 79 through now. I mean, you've seen everything basically covered in that world. I know it goes back a little further with even more.
Well, Simmons. They were the first.
Yeah.
Made a high-end, expensive FSR,
Yeah. Yeah, but you hear about how kind of unpleasant those early E-drums were to play on people's wrists and hands because it was like hitting just a pad. But
it was a progression. You had to learn.
Yeah.
When our hands hurt, oh, shoot, we got to do something about our hands.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I want to talk a little more about Radio City Music Hall. I mean, that is just such a cool gig. That has to be, it's like I said, it's hallowed ground. You now continue. Now you said you're not performing there, but you were still doing the programming, correct? For all of the electronic percussion stuff there. What does that entail? What is that process of programming everything like?
I had to make sure that in the theater it sounded better than the acoustic. One of the problems in Radio City, unlike going to a concert hall, the orchestra is on a band car, a literal car that's on wheels that goes up and down, up floors. It goes down into a sub-basement when they need to push us in this concrete enclosure while they move elevators to move scenery. So the volume was a nightmare to work when you were playing timpani or piatti, when you're surrounded by concrete. So they needed to make changes for the volume. So the drums, bass, keyboard, and percussion went electronic for the idea of mitigating sound. So that was the reason why. And they didn't know that I was doing this. I never let them know all these years. So from 79 to the I don't know, to the 2000 something, they didn't know. And I got a call from someone saying, hey, they're going to put a malletKAT in Radio City.
They didn't know you were making the malletKAT.
No.
And you're playing there.
I didn't want them to know. I was enjoying my acoustic world, stress-free, just play and go home. So when I heard that they were going to do that, that's when I went to management. I said, dude, no, you're hiring me if you're going to do and that's what happened. So I got the best sounds that one can find on a computer to make sure that when you play timpani, it sounded like timpani in the audio. It sounds better than acoustic because, like I said, with all this moving, there's all these mic issues. There was a nightmare. When my partner and I, when I was playing acoustic timpani, we would sit up in the mezzanine, and we'd get discouraged because we couldn't hear what we were playing. When our subs were playing, we were listening to ourselves. When I listened to with the electronics, I could hear when the player let go of the dampen pedal. I was able to hear the vibraphone sustain. That's how good they got the electronics to go through the 1,000,000-watt system, whatever they have there. So in that case, the electronics were better than the acoustic because of those constraints.
Yeah, I mean, electronic stuff, things are set to cut more. The volumes are kind of, things are figured out a little bit more. So I can totally see that. And it was interesting. I did an episode a while back with Warren Oates, who plays on Broadway a lot, and hearing about how much stuff is hidden in different rooms and the acoustics and it's moved around. It's like, yeah, that is a bit of a nightmare with microphones, and electronics would just take care of that problem.
Right. Exactly. I mean, I remember in one of the shows, I think it was Chorus Light or something I was playing, the xylophone, the bells are here, and the guy's head is right here playing trumpet. At Radio City, the French horns were here, right in front of me, and their bell would come at me, and I mean, it was horrifying to have those sounds smashing all day long. I mean, my hearing is shot.
Yeah.
So I loved having the ability to put a CAT headphone on. Those big, those headphones are like air muffs.
You guys are in pretty tight quarters. I mean, it's obviously pretty wild. Now, it's so interesting that you were the performer, but then you're also the business owner. Were you was it a little nerve-wracking to have your company, your baby, up on a huge Radio City Music Hall? Yeah.
The saying, you're as good as your last performance. Well, after a while, the conductors, if something happened to the equipment, it was the same as if I played bad. And I felt in jeopardy whenever some kind of crap happened. And in Radio City, because of this going back and forth, they have to unplug the plug and then go on battery power.
Ooh.
So there were these little spikes that a laptop would freeze, or the malletKAT would freeze because we're running around and our shoes get static and you touch the metal and stuff like that always happened. So I created this really complex redundancy system that if that went down, you can play here. If that went down, you can play here. If the computers went down, step on the foot switch, the next computer running at the same time would take over. Can't trust the mixers. Let's have two mixers. If the mixer went down, that kind of a thing.
Man. Geez, you clearly, and like I said before, your brain has to work in a certain kind of way with the flow. And I heard someone say, my old boss at a recording studio would say, when you're doing a lot of crazy routing with audio processing, whatever it is, MIDI, anything, it's like a flow of water, and you kind of turn it this way and it goes this way and it goes this way. And it's all simple and easy when you say it like that. But when you're in the actual, literally the pit doing it and programming it, it's not quite so easy. I mean, it can get very confusing very fast. I mean, that's about as big of a venue as you can get, where high stakes.
So what I'm demanding now from Radio City, that if I'm not there that I need to have a training session with the percussionist that you're hiring. Not the programming, but if this stops playing, is the MIDI cable connected? Let's start with a list. MIDI cable, reboot the computer, those kinds of things. And the problem is when notes are going by and you're not playing them, you kind of panic, and you have to go through some panics in your life to say, no. Stop. Just take it easy. What is that working? But that's not working. Oh, it must be this cable or that kind of thing. Or someone kicked the adapter on the floor.
I mean, things have to go wrong at one point I have many examples in the audio engineering world where something's gone wrong. Even before I start these interviews, I have always learned it's the simplest things of check how much hard drive space you have. Because I've done voiceover sessions historically where, again, I'm the engineer. Oh, I just started a session and there was 150 megabytes of space on a hard drive, which is eaten up like that. There's simple little things you need to look for, which you don't know unless you've been burnt. Yeah.
You mentioned Brian Lancer. When Brian left EMU, he went with Muse Receptor.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm friends with Brian. So before I knew it, before the computers, I had a half dozen Muse Receptors at Radio City. They work great. You turn them on, everything is fine. The problem with Muse Receptors was it was before there was SSD drives. So it would take minutes for it to load up, especially because you had to load the whole show. And the concept that I created at Radio City is rather than keep on loading in sounds and worrying about things to go wrong with that, load the whole damn show in and just access the sounds by calling up a different MIDI channel. So it's all there, less to go wrong. I had a situation once where the show's in pre-start, it's going to start any second. The show starts with me doing an 8-bar bongo solo on the jamKAT, and the electricity went bloop. So all the machines went down. And now they're starting to come back up. And they called the show. They didn't listen to me. And the pit's coming up. And I'm staring at the screen. I'm watching the little thing and I have a tambourine in my hand and I got to play the solo on my tambourine, things like that. What happened?
Okay, so that's what the purist percussionists who love their acoustic instruments, they're saying now, and I'm doing the devil's advocate thing. They're going, well, you don't get that problem with natural acoustic instruments, which...
Oh, sure you do. You put your hole through the bass drum.
Sure. There you go.
The snare drum cracks.
There's something always that goes wrong. I think electronic stuff, it is the way of the future, but it has been. It's not, it's 2022. It's not like I'm like, I have to convince people that computers and the internet are good, but we all know this, but there's still, to this day, anything you use, I feel like you have to have the redundancy. We rely so much on power. Really, to plug it in and batteries.
But they're getting better now. They're getting way better. Redundancy is key. If I have an important show, I have an extra malletKAT in my trunk or an extra computer. Always.
It's like bringing an extra snare to a gig. You know what I mean? It's just a different kind of thing. Obviously, you own the company, so you can have that. It's easier for you to bring stuff like that. But now, so people listening might be kind of in this, the world of playing vibes and percussive, more percussion stuff as opposed to just drum set players. Do you have artists on your roster and endorsements, or how does that work with people who might want to be, work with Mario?
Well, in the CAT days, we were playing with the big boys. So we had Vinnie Colaiuta and Dennis Chambers, and we had big people. But when I took back over in 97 or something, when I went on my own, it was just basically, you want it, you call me, you have it. It was a different kind of vibe. Now it's changing with Hal Leonard. Hey, we need young people. How many times people want to see this gray hair guy playing on a mallet instrument? So if anyone's listening, Matt DeBazy, California, young player from Berkeley. He lives in California. He is a fantastic modern electronic player.
Cool.
He's the best that I know. So we need young players. Anyone who's really wants to call me, please, because we're looking to make young people, to attract more young people.
Yeah. I just did the week before an episode about Dixon drums, and it's very much where there's certain brands where you kind of like there's opportunity, and like you're saying, nowadays you need the younger generation. I mean, it could even be older people, but you just need the faces on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook using it, because that's how we all find out about things, is the brand recognition of some monster percussionist playing, a malletKAT or anything that you've created. That's how you get to the younger generation, and we need that to keep it all going.
We need to keep music playing. The producers today don't want to use musical terms, don't want to use musical things. They are producers, not players. And a lot of people are attracted to that because it's so easy to grab a bass line and drop it on the timeline and listen to my composition. We have to get players to keep on playing. There's nothing like to have a relationship with an instrument and to play with someone and have that interaction with two players. How can you, garage band for me growing up was in the garage playing with other players. And I think that's what's lost today.
Yeah. I have found it. I've been in situations in the studio as an engineer where it would be limiting, where I would be around singers and more people who have like theory backgrounds than me, where I've never wanted to know theory more and just, I don't know, more. It wouldn't even be percussion. It would be just general music, piano knowledge. Then when you're sitting in a room with people who are really going back and forth with terms, and you're just like, and I'm sitting there. I mean, we're all drummers and percussionists, so I love everyone who's a drummer and percussionist. But I'm like, man, I wish I could hang more with these. I don't know, being able to call out the note that they're singing wrong or something like that. I feel like it sounds cheesy, but knowledge is power. It's truly, it helps you stand out, and I hope that is the case for a long time, where it's not just drag and drop, like you said. It is, but I have hope for the future. I see a lot of people on social media who are very great players, who are truly knowledgeable. There's a lot of great people out there, and I think there's a lot of hope.
Not to be an iconoclast, I think that the way they're teaching music in schools are just wrong. 4 years of species counterpoint, and graduating as a performing percussionist and don't know what a MIDI cable is. There's some real problems, I think, in the school system, because all it does is just continue to think that you're going to be one in 1,000 that get an orchestral gig, or you're going to end up teaching this and perpetuating the same thing.
Sure.
I think to be relevant today, if I had a kid that wanted to go to Berkeley and was going to cost me $250,000 to get his degree, it would try to be for practical musical applications. And that means so that when you go into a studio, you understand what's going on with the board. When you play an electronic, you can play the electronic instrument. It doesn't have to be your number one thing. If you're a marimbist, you're a marimbist. I don't really like, what I'm always have to do is, hey, let me hear your vibe sound. I can't tell you how many PASIC shows and NAMM shows. Let me hear the vibe sound. Okay, but this is so much more than a vibe sound. Hey, let me show you what it's like to play flute on this, or hey, I'm going to play guitar. You don't sound like a guitar player if you play a little guitar voicings. Guitar players play opens. So you got to learn. So each instrument becomes like a teacher when you hear yourself back and say, hey, that didn't sound like a flute. Oh, my sustain pedal was down and I blended a whole bunch of notes. You don't do that on that kind of thing. That there isn't a formal, that I know of, training on how to be musical on different sounds other than. So this is the kind of thing I was longing to see in schools, and then there'll be life in performance. I think young people will be excited to use what they're learning in their daily applications.
Sure. Yeah, it sounds like best of both worlds, where, man, take that, if you're at Berkeley or wherever, any of the great music schools, it's like, once you get back to your dorm or your apartment or your house, mess around with computers and make it your own. And that's how you stand out. You know what I mean? Make some crazy sounds and just have fun with it. But so as we wrap up, Mario, when can people expect this kind of, new stuff you're talking about, the next iteration of what you're working on? And on that note, where can they find out about it?
AlternateMode.com. Okay. Join our newsletter, and we send out newsletters on a regular basis. On Hal Leonard's side, catpercussion.com. Hal Leonard brings in lots of kits that have the KAT name on it, and there'll be new ones coming out, probably, definitely the NAMM show, which I believe is April right now. I'm hoping in the next month or two, I'll have an upgrade for the malletKAT GS. One of the reasons why we have such a good following is that people buy an instrument and they keep on using it for 20 years. There's not many companies that make an electronic instrument that stays that way for 30 years. I mean, it's essentially the same instrument. That's why it's time for a new one, because the electronics are getting harder and harder to find components, and technology has changed. So I'm really ready for that. I hope to be releasing tons of new stuff on the Facebook, alternate mode Facebook stuff. So the goal is, which I'm hoping that people enjoy, is that when I start playing, I'm going to play the conga part, the bongo part, the shaker part, the bass part, the guitar part, the vibe part, or the steel drum part. And then they say, wow, this is a whole different way of playing and practicing. Because the first time you play an accompanying part and you listen to yourself back, you go, oh man, I'm so busy. This is crazy. I would hate a guy who played like that. You don't know that until you listen to yourself playing back and say, my God, I must have hurt people the way I played that. It's that kind of thing.
Sure.
So I'm learning now how to be a composer in my little practice sessions. And I say, this is really valuable. I wish I had that in school, a little program to listen to yourself compose parts. So that's exciting for me. It's a growth thing for me. I'm nowhere near saying that this, I'm learning. But but I don't mind sharing my learning in public to see how it grows.
Totally. It holds you kind of responsible, and that's a great way to look at it. You usually don't listen back to yourself and go, oh, I should have played more notes. But that's cool. Everything will be in the description, all of the alternate mode links and malletKAT and drumKAT, all that stuff, the Hal Leonard links I'll share, and Mario's Facebook and all that stuff. And then Mario's going to be kind enough to hang out and record a Patreon bonus episode where we are going to talk about his 1979 audition for Radio City Music Hall, which I think will be an interesting story, and I'm excited to hear about it. So if you guys want to hear that, you can go to patreon.com/drumhistorypodcast, or go to my website, drumhistorypodcast.com. There's a little button to click, and you can check out that and like 65 or 70 other bonus episodes. So there's lots of cool stuff there.
And I want to thank you. It's very nice. Very kind of you to think of inviting me.
Thank you very much. Well, the first big thank you beyond you goes to Brian Lancer for getting us connected. And then
thank you, Brian.
Our mutual friend, Barry James, who has been going through some health issues, but he's been talking to me about getting you on the show for, I want to say, maybe 3 years now plus. And we finally made it happen, but I really hope Barry is pulling through and doing well. And I'm sure he's listening right now. So, we love Barry, and I hope he feels better.
Love you, Barry.
Yep. Awesome. Cool. Well, Mario, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.